Chapter 1498, Three-Way Battle. Chapter 1498, Three-Way Battle, Author's Note. Unedited chapter. I am not risking the safety of Earth on the hope that this thing will stay captured. It is even more powerful than I remember. Jack waved Gustav off with a gentle yet firm shove. I can't let you kill her, Gustav stated with a strong tone. Kid, if you know what is good for you, leave now. Jack already had enough of Gustav's interference. I will consider you an enemy if you disrupt one more time, he added with a stern look. I can't do that. Gustav's eyes twinkled with a crimson glow as he slowly began to unleash his energy. Jack was immediately taken aback as he felt the steaming presence ripple through the surroundings. I see. You're no ordinary person, are you? Jack felt it made sense since Gustav had appeared before him so suddenly and was even flying. I don't want her dead. Foomsh! Heavy winds began spreading about the surroundings as both their energies clashed just like that of Jack and Angie's at the time. Jack discovered that this unknown person was a mixed blood and they were not in any way weak. His eyes squinted as he twirls his fingers, prepared to use a very powerful ability. Even though the space seal construct only lasts for 2 seconds, not a single life form on Earth will be capable of movement. I will use that brief time to end both their lives, Jack decided internally. Careful. He is going for the kill. It will be fine. I am not so helpless that a single attack will be able to end my life, even though he is the strongest mixed blood. Gustav responded internally as he prepared to use a powerful ability as well. I'm about that. The system seemed like it was going to inform him about something when an unexpected situation suddenly occurred. Angie, whose figure was a mangled mess within the space construct Jack created, suddenly glared at Gustav's direction and then back at Jack. Her eyes turned bloodshot as she exploded forth with a wave of dark energy. Boom! Both Jack and Gustav were shocked as the wave swept across hundreds of miles, causing great destruction. Jack had surrounded himself and a few other structures around in his constructs to avoid accidents, but while Gustav seemed to have been consumed by the destruction, Jack couldn't confirm since he suddenly had his plate full again. He didn't even have the time to lament as Angie came at him with unbridled ferocity. Boom! Boom! Sounds akin to thunderclaps rang out as they clashed repeatedly. As the visibility of a particular area returned to normal, Gustav's figure could be spotted and scathed from the previous encounter. Gustav watched from a distance with a look of skepticism. As Angie and Jack exchanged blows, the ground beneath them shattered, sending shockwaves across the icy region. Angie's inverted horn emitted beams of dark energy that Jack narrowly dodged, while Jack's fists glowed with a radiant light that seemed to pierce through the darkness. I should have ended this when I had the chance, Jack growled in frustration. Angie remained silent with an unchanging expression. Another blade materialized in her hand at this moment, causing the surroundings to twist and turn. It seemed even more powerful than the previous one. Angie proceeded to swing her dark blade, and a rift opened in the air, tearing through the very fabric of reality. Jack narrowly avoided the attack as the rift closed behind him with a violent snap. Gustav knew he couldn't wait any longer. Summoning all his strength, he propelled himself forward, his form blurring as he moved at lightning speed. He appeared between Angie and Jack with his arms outstretched to block their attacks. Stop! Gustav shouted, his voice echoing through the frozen landscape. Both Angie and Jack paused, their eyes widening in surprise at the sudden appearance of Gustav. For a brief moment, there was silence as the three of them stood in a tense standoff. He managed to stop my hand? Who is this kid? Jack wondered internally. Angie, on the other hand. One couldn't tell what she was thinking or if she was even thinking at all. Angie, it's me, Gustav said, his voice softening. You can stop this now. It doesn't have to get any worse. Jack's eyes narrowed as he looked at Gustav. How do you know her? You are clearly a mixed blood, he asked with a cautious tone. She's my friend, but something has happened to her. She needs help. Still wanting to hide his identity, Gustav could only say this much. Angie's expression hardened. She remained silent, but her grip on the dark blade tightened. Angie, please, don't give him more reasons to end you, whatever this is. We can fix it, Gustav pleaded, his voice filled with desperation. For a moment, it seemed like Angie hesitated as her eyes flickered with uncertainty. But then her expression hardened again, and she lashed out with a powerful strike aimed at Gustav. Gustav barely managed to dodge as his eyes widened in shock. Angie, no. Jack took advantage of the momentary distraction and charged at Angie as his fists glowed with radiant energy. She is a threat. I need to neutralize her, he said, his voice cold and determined. No. Gustav shouted and moved to intercept Jack. The three of them clashed, their powers creating a blinding display of light and darkness. Gustav found himself torn between trying to protect Angie and stopping Jack from harming her, while also trying to stop her as well. While in their midst, both Angie and Jack lunged at him simultaneously. Their combined assault was overwhelming, and despite using multiple abilities to defend himself, Gustav found himself struggling to keep up. His eyes darted like an arrow, following but barely deflecting their attacks that were continuously being sent out at a speed that a beta, ranked mixed blood, would be unable to handle. Gustav's perception followed through as two powerful fists drove forward from both sides. He had no choice but to parry both attacks as his body got covered completely in iron silk upon collision. Ugh! Gustav grunted as he was sent flying across the entire region, crashing through buildings and leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. The force of the impact rattled his bones as blood trailed from the side of his lips, but he quickly recovered. Meanwhile, Angie and Jack had focused on battling each other again, since Gustav was momentarily out of the picture. Jack used his construct abilities to teleport massive asteroids from space, hurling them at Angie with deadly precision. Angie, with her incredible speed and agility, effortlessly deflected the asteroids with her dark blade, slicing through them as if they were made of paper. The ground trembled with each collision, and the sky lit up with bursts of energy as their attacks clashed. Gustav watched from a distance, his mind racing. He knew he had to do something to stop this madness, but he was hesitant to use the one ability that could undoubtedly put a pause to the ongoing situation. Cosmic superiority. Unfortunately, Gustav knew that using cosmic superiority would mean revealing his true identity. Jack and the rest of the world would no doubt identify him, since there was only a single Earthing who had achieved cosmic superiority. Gustav clenched his fists as his eyes narrowed with resolve. I have no choice, he muttered to himself. Connecting to the base of his core, Gustav activated his cosmic superiority. A glowing cross appeared in his pupils as red-pinkish energy spread from him, cascading across the world. The sheer force of his power caused all living things to pause their actions and drop to their knees in reverence. Jack felt the overwhelming pressure and tried to fight against it. Is this? He gasped, struggling to stay in the air as his body trembled. His mind clicked as he recalled the only person on Earth capable of such power. Gustav, it has to be you, Jack realized, gritting his teeth. Gustav didn't say a word in response. Instead, he stared at Jack with an apologetic expression. Despite his best efforts, Jack eventually succumbed to the power and fell to his knees. The realization that Gustav was behind this filled him with an indescribable tension. However, Gustav's plan hit a major snag. Angie was completely unaffected by the power of cosmic superiority. She moved with an unchanging expression. How are you able to move? Gustav's eyes widened in disbelief. Although Gustav knew his cosmic superiority had been resisted by beings far above his level of strength, this was years back. He was way more stronger now, and even Jack was unable to withstand it. So how? How was Angie unaffected? Gustav couldn't wrap his head around this. Angie didn't respond. Instead, she raised her dark blade and lunged at Gustav with blinding speed. Gustav barely had time to react, his cosmic energy flaring as he deflected the attack with a powerful cross-shaped barrier. "Angie, stop!" Gustav shouted as his voice echoed through the chaos. Chapter 1499 Cosmic Separation. Chapter 1499 Cosmic Separation. Author's Note. Unedited. Chapter The clash between Angie's blade and Gustav's barrier created a shockwave that rippled through the surrounding area, sending Jack flying since he was currently unable to defend himself. Gustav could feel the strain of maintaining the barrier against Angie's relentless power. Could it be? Gustav's mind raced with theories. Angie's existence has been altered, and Yarki is only effective against beings from this plane? Gustav felt a strong urge to completely incinerate Falco's father at this moment. His chest glowed up at this moment as a golden beam gathered and shot at Angie. Thum, it burst forth with unfathomable power, ramming straight into Angie and sending her hurling across the air. "If I have to beat sense into you to bring back Angie, I will," Gustav stated while springing forward with extreme speed. He caught Angie's horn in mid-air and spun her around before flinging her in a particular direction. Angie flipped continuously across the air and slammed into a mountain, causing it to blast apart while her figure kept trailing forward without slowing. Gustav's figure turned into a streak that followed her closely while arching his arm backwards to deliver another powerful strike. Gustav's muscles rippled with newfound strength as he battled Angie across the world. Every punch he landed sent shock waves through the ground, causing tremors that echoed for miles. Angie fought back with equal ferocity. Her half-black and half-white form was a blur of motion as she countered his attacks with her dark blade. "You need to snap out of it, Angie," Gustav roared, ramming her into a mountain. The peak crumbled under the force of their collision, sending rocks and debris cascading down the slopes. Angie writhed and twisted, her eyes burning with a crazed intensity. Her half-black and half-white form radiated an eerie power, and her inverted horn gleamed ominously. She lashed out with her dark blade, aiming to slice through Gustav's defenses. He caught her wrist mid-swing, twisting it with a force that made her drop the weapon. "I will show you what it is to be a cosmic superior being," Gustav declared, thrusting 2 fingers toward Angie's chest. His fingers crackled with energy as a reddish and golden cross formed at their tips. The cross phased through Angie's body, expanding rapidly. Angie's eyes widened in shock as the cross pulled her entire being towards it, binding her in place. "Cosmic separation," Gustav shouted, his voice echoing with a powerful resonance. Angie screamed in agony as the cross began to split her apart. One half of her was pure white, the other pitch black. Her body convulsed violently, the process tearing her in two. The splitting caused her to cry out, her voice filled with pain and confusion. "Oghai!" Angie's voice, a blend of desperation and torment, reverberated in the air. But Gustav was relentless. He pushed harder, focusing all his willpower on completing the separation. Beads of sweat formed on his brow as he poured more energy into the cross, determined to free her from the corruption that had taken hold. Angie's body continued to split, the division nearly complete. Her screams intensified, echoing across the desolate landscape. Just as Gustav was about to succeed, another horn burst from the other side of Angie's skull. Her power surged, and with a primal scream, she broke free from the cosmic bind. Her eyes flared with an even greater intensity, and her form glowed with an unearthly light. She lunged at Gustav with newfound strength, her strikes faster and more powerful than before. Gustav tried to counter, but she was too quick. Her blade slashed through his defenses, sending him flying through the air as a giant gash appeared on his belly. "Fuck, if I hadn't been any slower, I would have been split in two. Gustav's eyes narrowed in disbelief. You can't keep this up forever, Gustav said through gritted teeth, wiping blood from his mouth. I won't let you. His belly merged together as he charged at her with blinding speed while his fists glowed with cosmic energy. Angie met his assault head-on, their clash sending sparks flying in all directions. The ground beneath them cracked and splintered, unable to withstand the force of their battle. Angie unleashed a barrage of strikes, each one faster and more precise than the last. Gustav deflected most of them, but a few landed, leaving deep cuts on his skin. He retaliated with a powerful uppercut, sending her skyward. He leaped after her, meeting her midair with a series of crushing blows. Gustav's attacks didn't necessarily do much damage, but each of Angie's attacks were completely devastating, their forms barely visible as they moved at incredible speeds. The ground beneath them was torn asunder, the air crackling with energy. Remember who you are, Angie. Gustav voiced with a strong tone. Remember us. Remember everything we fought for. For a brief moment, Angie's eyes softened, the darkness within her receding. But then, her resolve hardened, and she attacked with even more ferocity. She landed a powerful kick to Gustav's chest, sending him crashing through several buildings. He emerged from the rubble, bloodied but undeterred. He charged at her with renewed determination while Angie met his assault head-on. Angie, stop this madness! Gustav yelled, his voice echoing through the ruins. However, Angie didn't spare him in the slightest as they collided once more. Their clash shook the earth, their blows causing shockwaves that leveled structures and uprooted trees. Angie's blade met Gustav's fists in a flurry of sparks and energy. Despite the pain, Gustav's determination burned brighter than ever. You were stronger than this, he said, blocking a strike that would have cleaved him in two. I know you're still in there. With a burst of energy, Gustav activated his cosmic separation, hoping to subdue her. The glowing cross in his eyes intensified, casting a radiant light that bathed the battlefield. Angie faltered for a moment, but her new horn seemed to shield her from the full effect. Die. She growled as her blade cut through the air with deadly precision. Gustav managed to evade at the last second, but the dark residual energy sent him flying. Gustav gritted his teeth, trying to keep up with Angie's relentless assault. His muscles ached from the constant exertion, and every blow he landed felt like it took more out of him than it did her. She was a whirlwind of destruction, her inverted horn gleaming with malevolent energy as she attacked with relentless ferocity. Angie's expression remained blank, her eyes devoid of recognition as she pressed the attack. If it wasn't for regeneration, Gustav would have long been a goner. Meanwhile, Jack was struggling against the overwhelming power of Gustav's cosmic superiority. The oppressive energy had since brought him to his knees despite bearing the title of World's Strongest. But he wasn't one to be defeated easily. Channeling his bloodline abilities, Jack formed a space construct around himself, causing his being to vibrate at a different frequency from the current plane. The world around him shimmered as he phased partially out of existence. In this state, Jack was both on Earth and not, allowing him to bypass the effects of Gustav's cosmic superiority. Once free, he prepared to launch an attack. Gustav, caught up in his battle with Angie, sensed the shift in energy but couldn't fully grasp what was happening. His eyes widened as Angie suddenly vanished from his sight. Where did she go? Gustav muttered, his eyes scanning the area frantically. Before he could react, Angie reappeared behind Jack with a speed that even Gustav's eyes struggled to follow. The dark energy she emitted turned the sky to night, her blade materializing in her grasp once more. No, Gustav shouted as his frame shot through the darkened landscape, but his speed seemed to have reduced drastically. In a blur of motion, Angie sliced diagonally with her blade while Jack rushed backwards with light speed. The air was filled with the sickening sound of flesh and bone being severed. Jack's eyes widened in shock as his body divided into two halves that fell to the ground, blood jetting out like a crimson fountain. I evaded. How did she? These were Jack's last words as he stared at the other half of himself getting swallowed up by darkness. Angie, stop! Gustav cried while rushing towards her, but he was too late. The deed was done. Jack, the strongest mixed blood, lay in disintegrating pieces on the ground. What did you just do? Gustav lost all composure as he screamed out, but a fuse was instantly lit in his mind. His heart pounded in his chest as he recalled the vision of the future. It was happening right before his eyes. Does this mean? Gustav immediately leapt backwards, distancing himself from Angie. I need to go. He tried tapping on his dimensional bracelet, but Angie suddenly appeared before him with her blade thrusting forward. Watch out! The system screamed in his head as the blade rippled through the air, aiming at his chest. Chapter 1500 Second Death. Chapter 1500 Second Death. Author's Note. Unedited chapter. Gustav heart pounded with desperation as Angie blade approached at a speed quicker than he could activate his dimensional bracelet. Lightning Blitz has been activated. As he triggered the Lightning Blitz, his form dissolved into a streak of lightning, racing away from her. He reappeared over 1,000 miles away in an instant, basking in the change of scenery. Before he could even process his next move, a sharp pain erupted in his chest. Angie's blade, dark and malevolent, had followed him through space and time, stabbing deep into his heart. His eyes widened in disbelief as he looked down at the blade protruding from his chest. Dark, corrosive energy spread rapidly from the point of infiltration, coursing through his veins and seeping into his very being. No, Angie, he whispered, feeling the life force draining from him. He dropped to the ground with his body convulsing as the dark energy continued to spread, snuffing out the light within him. Angie stood a short distance away, her blade still connected to him through a thin, almost imperceptible thread of darkness. Her eyes were blank, devoid of the warmth and life that had once defined her. In the depths of her mind, a voice whispered, "Good human, you have destroyed the outworldly." Suddenly, Angie's eyes flickered with recognition. The haze clouding her mind began to lift, and she stared in horror at Gustav's lifeless form. Tears welled up in her eyes, streaming down her cheeks as she fell to her knees beside him. "Gustav!" Her voice broke with emotion. The voice in her head persisted, cold and unyielding. "Now, kill yourself as well." Angie clutched her head. "What have I done?" "Kill yourself." She raised the blade towards her neck in the next instant. Meanwhile, in the void of darkness that was now Gustav's consciousness, he floated aimlessly. The system's voice echoed around him. "You have died, Gustav. The darkness from the blade is interfering with your regeneration and reincarnation abilities. Does that mean I can't come back to life?" Gustav questioned. "If your reincarnation bloodline doesn't kick in, you won't. No, this can't be the end. There must be something that can be done." The system responded, its tone almost apologetic. "I do not know of any solution. The dark energy is too powerful." Images from the system's feedback flashed before Gustav, showing Angie kneeling by his corpse, her form racked with sobs. She held the blade to her neck, her resolve faltering as the voice urged her to end her life. "No, Angie, don't!" Gustav shouted into the void, but his voice reached no ears. He thought of Falco, Endrick, and Ealdris, who were on their way to the Alliance. He thought of all the battles they had fought together, the sacrifices they had made. This couldn't be the end. It couldn't. Angie's tearful eyes met the blade as she prepared to decapitate herself. "I'm sorry, Gustav. I'm so sorry." desperation clawed at Gustav's soul. There has to be a way, he thought, his mind frantically searching for any glimmer of hope. In the midst of his despair, a golden light began to glow in the void. It started as a faint flicker, but grew brighter with each passing moment. Gustav reached out, his fingers brushing against the light. To his surprise, it felt warm and familiar. The ancient hourglass, the system's voice noted with a hint of surprise. The hourglass appeared above Gustav's corpse, its sands shimmering with an ethereal glow. As it turned upside down, the golden sand within began to flow in reverse. Time itself started to rewind. Gustav felt a pull as his consciousness was drawn back to the light. The dark energy receded and the wound in his chest closing as if it had never been there. The blade poised at Angie's neck suddenly froze. Her eyes widened as she watched the events around her unfold in reverse. The golden light enveloped both Gustav and Angie, reversing the damage done by their brutal fight. The buildings they had destroyed reformed, the earth healed, and the very fabric of reality stitched itself back together. The pain and agony that had consumed them both dissipated. Gustav found himself suspended in the vast, timeless void as the universe rewound. Watching events unfold in reverse, he saw Jack's body reassemble, Angie's deadly blade retreat from his heart, and everything gradually resetting. His consciousness floated above it all, detached from the temporal currents. He devised a plan to trap and isolate Angie, ensuring her dark influence would no longer pose a threat. When the universe's timeline reached the point of Angie's initial appearance, Gustav seized the ancient hourglass, stopping the reversal. Time halted, and he re-entered his body. Gustav bolted toward the icy region where Jack and Angie were about to clash. Arriving just in time, he stood between them. Jack, sensing the shift in time and retaining his memories from the other timeline, immediately lunged to strike Angie down. Gustav intercepted him, shouting, "Stop, Jack! There's another way." Jack's expression twisted in confusion and anger. "Gustav, you can't protect her. She's too dangerous." Ignoring Jack's protests, Gustav turned to Angie and embraced her tightly. "I will end your torment," he whispered. Activating assimilation, he began to absorb her body into his own. Angie struggled as the process began. Her black and white form twisted and writhed, trying to escape the pull. "Kruha!" she screamed in a tone filled with both rage and agony. The assimilation was excruciating, each second stretching into an eternity. Gustav felt every ounce of her pain, the darkness within her fighting against him. The air around them shimmered with energy, the ground beneath them cracking and heaving under the immense pressure. Jack watched while clenching his fists in frustration. He wanted to intervene, but something in Gustav's resolve held him back. "Gustav, if this goes wrong, I will have no other choice but to end you alongside with her." Gustav gritted his teeth, his voice strained. "You won't have to." The process continued for nearly an hour, the struggle evident on both their faces. Slowly, Angie's dark form began to meld with Gustav's, her features blending into his own. His skin took on a pale hue, and dark tendrils of energy swirled around him. Finally, with a final, agonizing surge of power, Gustav completed the assimilation. His body now bore a mixture of his and Angie's features, a stark contrast of light and dark. He gasped for breath, feeling the surging darkness within him. Without hesitation, Gustav plunged his hand into his chest, gritting his teeth against the searing pain. His fingers wrapped around something solid, and with a fierce tug, he pulled out an entirely human Angie. She emerged from his body, collapsing to the ground, unconscious but free from the dark influence that had consumed her. Gustav, now bearing the full brunt of the darkness, fought to contain it. The black energy roiled within him, threatening to overwhelm his senses. His vision blurred, and he felt himself slipping into unconsciousness. Kill. Destroy. Kill. Destroy. Retrieve the Dark Angel. Cause catastrophe. Kill the strongest. His mind raced with all sorts of thoughts that sought to consume him. Jack rushed forward, catching Gustav before he hit the ground. "Gustav, stay with me," he shouted. Gustav's eyes fluttered open for a moment, his voice barely a whisper. "Jack, take care of her. She's free now. I have to put myself to sleep, or the voices will overwhelm me. Help them." With that, Gustav's body went limp, the darkness still churning within him. Jack carefully laid him down beside Angie, both of them unconscious but alive. As the wind held around them, Jack took a deep breath. His thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. "This kid, you truly are something else," he muttered. But what did he mean by help them? Jack wondered internally. Inside Gustav's spacecraft, Eldris, Falco, and Endrick were gathered around the central control panel. The ship AI's voice echoed through the cabin, informing them that their journey would take approximately 3 days, after passing through designated wormholes. 3 days, said, tapping the console thoughtfully. "That gives us enough time to review our plans and ensure we're ready for anything." Eldris nodded, his eyes shimmering with determination. "We've gone over it countless times, but we need to be absolutely certain. There's no room for error." Falco leaned back in his seat as dark energy swirled subtly around his fingers. "I just hope there won't be any mishaps. Rhea is counting on us." Endrick, sitting slightly apart from the others, felt a gnawing unease that he couldn't shake. He didn't want to alarm the group, so he kept his concerns to himself. As the conversation continued around him, he excused himself quietly and made his way to one of the private spaces in the ship. The room was dimly lit, providing a quiet retreat from the bustling activity outside. Endrick took a deep breath and communicated with Husarius, a glowing green that appeared on his forehead, pulsating gently. "Husarius!" Endrick called softly, his voice echoing in the small chamber. "I need your guidance." The familiar, calming presence of Husarius filled his mind. "Endrick, what troubles you?" "There's something off," Endrick admitted. Chapter 15, a 1 Substation Intermission. Chapter 15, a 1 Substation Intermission, Author's Note. Unedited chapter. I can't put my finger on it, but I have this overwhelming sense that something is going wrong. I was hoping you could help me see into the fates. Husarius responded with a tone that was both kind and stern. "Endrick, you know that seeing into the fates continuously is a misuse of your time, candidate abilities. Also, have you forgotten that the fabric of time is delicate and should not be manipulated lightly? We have seen the consequences of doing so in the past. You exist for the purpose of balance." "I understand that," Endrick said, frustration creeping into his voice. "But we're walking into the heart of the Alliance. If something goes wrong, it could mean the end for us and for Rhea." Husarius was silent for a moment, weighing the situation. Despite the situation, there could be diverse consequences if we alter the fates once more. It should only be glimpsed upon in relation to situations with the outworldly. Unless you wish to put your brother in danger again, I don't advise it. Endrick had a thoughtful look upon hearing that. Gustav's safety was extremely important to him, but he also couldn't imagine how Gustav would react if they all wind up getting into big trouble here. "Okay, but can you tell me one thing?" Endrick voiced with a low tone. "What is it?" Husarius inquired. "Can you at least tell me that we are not currently on a turbulent path?" Endrick asked. "Every path through time is a turbulent part. There is no smooth sailing at any junction, especially when we are getting closer to it every day." Husarius responded cryptically. "That isn't what I mean. How does our current path end in correlation with the goal of retrieving our friend? Good or bad?" Endrick decided to be a bit more specific this time. That is, The green dot on Endrick's forehead glowed brighter, and Endrick felt his consciousness expand. A single image of Rhea embracing all four of them appeared in his mind briefly. Husarius didn't say a single word and only showed that. Endrick nodded in understanding. Thank you. Don't thank me. I only showed you a single glimpse. Arriving at that junction is one that won't come easy, but when the time comes, you will know what step to take, Husarius responded. Endrick nodded again as he exited the private space and rejoined the others, who were still engrossed in their plans. E glanced up as Endrick approached. Everything okay? Yeah, Endrick replied, forcing a smile. Just needed a moment to clear my head. They continued discussing their strategy, refining every detail to ensure their success. The spacecraft thrummed steadily as it propelled them through the vast expanse of space. What if the Alliance catches on? They'll likely try to trap us, Eldris replied, his eyes focused on a holographic display, which is why we need to be ready for anything. We stick to the plan, E said firmly. We get in, find Rhea, and get out before they can react. They spent the next few hours going over their plans again, each detail scrutinized to ensure there were no gaps. As the first wormhole approached, the AI's voice echoed through the cabin. Prepare for entry into wormhole in T-1 minute. The group secured themselves in their seats as the wormhole loomed ahead. It was a swirling vortex of cosmic energy. The ship shuddered as it was drawn into the vortex, the stars outside blurring into streaks of light. The journey through the wormhole was brief, and they emerged on the other side, the stars returning to their normal, twinkling selves. The AI announced their successful transition, and they continued on their course. As their journey continued, Endrick, Eldris, Falco, and E prepared themselves for the next phase of their mission. They were about to arrive at an Alliance substation, a critical stopover on their way to the main Alliance base. This substation was essential for restocking resources and acquiring disguises for their infiltration. The substation was a large, imposing structure that floated in the depths of space. It was surrounded by smaller defense satellites and patrol ships, all part of the Alliance's formidable security network. The substation itself was a behemoth, with docking bays for numerous spacecraft and a vast array of support facilities. Usually, any planetary species underneath the umbrella of the Alliance were allowed access. It wasn't exactly where the Alliance leaders met, so this location was pretty much public. As they approached, the ship's AI announced, entering Docking Bay 3, please prepare for disembarkation. Endrick, Eldris, Falco, and E donned their MBO officer disguises, making sure everything was in place. They were all originally MBO officers, so it wasn't difficult to adopt the mannerisms to avoid suspicion. The docking bay was a bustling hub of activity. Alliance Corps members in their blue uniforms, each adorned with the emblem of a hand holding the universe, moved about, tending to various tasks. The emblem gleamed under the bright lights. Eldris and Falco took the lead, walking confidently toward a group of Alliance officers. One of them, a tall, muscular alien with greenish skin and multiple limbs, noticed them approaching. Greetings, Eldris said, flashing a friendly smile. We're MBO officers on a mission and need to restock some resources. Mind pointing us in the right direction? The green-skinned officer, whose star-shaped patterns across his body shimmered faintly, looked them over. Sure thing. You can head to Storage Bay 5. We have everything you might need. Much appreciated, Falco added, engaging the officer in a casual conversation. Been a busy day here, huh? The officer chuckled, his multiple limbs gesturing animatedly. You bet. Always something going on. By the way, Imcorn, you folks from Earth? Yep, that's right, Eldris responded, maintaining a friendly demeanor. Imcaldris, and this is Balco. Busy times back home, too. As they chatted, E discreetly slipped away, using his vortex to get into one of the private storage points. The room was dimly lit and filled with various supplies. He quickly located a rack of Alliance Corps uniforms and a small transmission tool, exactly what they needed for the next part of their mission. Back in the docking bay, Eldris and Falco continued their conversation with Korn and another officer, a slender figure with silvery skin and luminous blue eyes named Vira. "So, what's it like working at a substation?" Falco asked, genuinely curious. Vira smiled. "It's a mix of routine and surprises. You get to meet interesting folks like yourselves. But we also deal with the occasional skirmish or emergency. Keeps things lively." "Sounds like a good balance," Eldris said, nodding. "Well, we should get our supplies and be on our way. Thanks for the help, Korn, Vira." "Any time," Korn replied, waving a limb in farewell. "Safe travels." E reappeared near the entrance, giving a subtle nod to indicate he had what they needed. They made their way to Storage Bay 5, collected the necessary resources, and headed back to their ship without arousing any suspicion. Once they were back on board and safely away from the substation, they breathed a collective sigh of relief. "That went smoothly," E said, holding up the uniforms and the transmission tool. "We should be able to blend in better now." "Good job, everyone," Endrick said, steering the ship back on course. "We have what we need to proceed. Let's keep going." As they continued their journey, the ship vibrated steadily, a comforting sound in the otherwise silent expanse of space. The stolen uniforms and transmission tool were securely stored, ready for the next phase of their plan. Falco leaned back in his seat, looking thoughtful. "You know, that Korn guy seemed pretty decent. Makes you wonder how many of them are just following orders." "Probably most of them," E agreed. "It's easy to forget that there's a lot of regular folks caught up in all this." Eldris nodded. "That's true, but we have a mission and we can't lose sight of that." Endrick, who had been silent for a while, finally spoke up. "I have a feeling things are going to get more intense from here on out. Let's stay focused and be ready for anything." The group fell into a contemplative silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The Alliance was a formidable adversary, but they were determined to rescue Rhea. As they approached the next wormhole, the AI's voice echoed through the cabin. "Prepare for entry into wormhole in T-1 minute." The ship shuddered slightly as it was drawn into the vortex, the stars outside blurring into streaks of light once more. The journey was far from over, but they were one step closer to their goal. During the transition through the wormhole, Endrick took a moment to reflect on his earlier conversation with Husarius. "Gotta keep an eye out," he resolved to remain vigilant and protect Gustav's friends at all costs. As they emerged from the wormhole, the stars returned to their normal, twinkling selves. The AI announced their successful transition, and they continued on their course. Chapter 1502, Awakening in Bondage. Chapter 1502, Awakening in Bondage, author's note. Unedited chapter. Angie slowly regained consciousness. Her eyes fluttered open to an unfamiliar sight. She was in a cold facility where the walls lined with a dull metallic sheen and harsh, clinical lights that reflected off the surfaces. There were ability dampeners spread across the walls. The air was thick with the buzz of machinery and the low murmur of voices. Before her was a transparent glass wall, beyond which lay another room. Her heart sank as she saw Gustav there, restrained and unconscious. His body was marked with dark, sinuous lines that seemed to pulse and move across his skin. Panic surged through her as she tried to move, only to find herself similarly restrained. Glowing cuffs bound her wrists and ankles, rendering her unable to harness any of her powers. She pulled against them, but it was futile. "Gustav," she whispered with her voice trembling in fear and desperation. In the hallway outside her cell, she noticed several MBO higher-ups and scientists. They were conversing in low tones, occasionally glancing in her direction. The atmosphere was tense and filled with an air of impending judgment. Hey, Angie called out, her voice stronger now. What's going on? Why am I restrained? Let me out of here. One of the higher-ups, a tall man with silver hair and a stern expression, turned to face her. His eyes were cold and devoid of empathy. You're still undergoing observation, he said flatly. We need to ensure you're no longer a threat. Angie's eyes blazed with fury. And what about Gustav? What are you doing to him? The man's gaze shifted to Gustav's unconscious form, then back to Angie. He will undergo trials for his crimes against humanity and the universe at large. A surge of anger and despair overwhelmed Angie. No, you don't understand. He's not guilty of anything. You can't do this to him. The higher-up's expression remained unchanged. His actions speak for themselves. The evidence is overwhelming. Angie struggled against her restraints, her frustration mounting. You're wrong. You have to listen to me. Let me stand trial instead. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. The scientists continued their discussions, seemingly indifferent to her cries. In her desperation, Angie focused on Gustav. She pulled against the cuffs with all her might, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't break free. Please, you have to let him go. Her voice broke, tears welling in her eyes. This is all my fault. The higher-up turned away, dismissing her words as inconsequential. Angie's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the gravity of their situation. Everything that had happened played in her mind, and she realized just how much of a mess she had made. She feared for what might happen to Gustav if these people had their way. Angie's eyes darted around the room, searching for any means of escape. She couldn't think of anything that didn't require her bloodline abilities. You cowards! You only want to place blames on him for your selfish interests, don't you? Angie's voice rang out. The higher-ups turned to face her with straight looks. Gustav Crimson is responsible for the destruction of planet Osius. He has caused numerous damage across the cosmos since then, escaping the pursuit of the MBO, destroying ships, abducting children of alien races, and so many others. The one who had spoke before voiced once more. That is a very big lie. Gustav didn't destroy planet Osius. I was present there, and am sure everything else you bastards are pinning on him are false. Angie cried out with an enraged look. Whatever you think is not our problem. As the heated back and forth between Angie and the higher-ups intensified, the air in the facility grew thick with tension. Angie's words fell on deaf ears as the higher-ups remained resolute in their decision to keep her restrained and to put Gustav on trial. The scientists, too, seemed indifferent to her cries, focused on their data and instruments. Just then, the doors to the hallway swung open with a loud creak, and an imposing figure stepped into the room. The presence of Jack, the most powerful mixed blood, cast a long shadow over the proceedings. His towering form and the raw aura emanating from him commanded immediate attention and respect. The higher-ups and scientists turned their heads in unison, their expressions shifting from stern determination to wary caution. I made a promise to Gustav, Jack announced, with his voice resonating through the room. Angie is in my care. The higher-ups exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a woman with sharp features and steely eyes, stepped forward. Jack, you know how proceedings work. We cannot simply release her. Observations need to be completed first. Jack's eyes, filled with the pride of strength, bore into her. He was usually more overlooking and followed orders to the latter, but he was also something who stuck to his word. Gustav has done more to protect this world than most of you realize. Anyways, as I have stated, Angie is in my care. I am more than capable of making sure she poses no more threat. Angie, still restrained, looked at Jack with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Jack, what will happen to Gustav? She asked in a trembling tone. Jack's gaze softened as he turned to her. I'm not sure, Angie, but I promise you this. I will do my best to help him. If he truly isn't guilty of these charges, I will make sure he is set free." One of the higher-ups, an older man with graying hair and a stern expression, stepped forward. "Jack, are you betraying humanity by siding with them?" he voiced in suspicion. Jack's eyes narrowed as a palpable wave of power rippled through the room. "Betraying humanity? No. I am ensuring that true justice is served. I will make sure that everything is done fairly and that no one is condemned without a proper trial." The scientists who had been silently observing now shifted uneasily. One of them, a young woman with auburn hair, spoke up. "But the data we have, it points to significant anomalies. We can't ignore that." Jack turned his attention to her with an unreadable expression. "You can hold on to Gustav for a bit, but she will be coming with me." Angie's eyes were filled with tears, both of relief and lingering fear. "Jack, please. You have to save him. He doesn't deserve this." Jack nodded. "I understand, Angie. But for now you need to stay strong. We will wait till he regains consciousness." The higher-ups seemed to be at an impasse. The woman's steely eyes met Jack's unwavering gaze. "We cannot simply hand over jurisdiction because of your promise. Protocol must be followed." Jack's presence seemed to grow even more formidable as the very air crackled with his energy. "Angie is under my protection, and I will oversee her care." The higher-ups exchanged worried looks. They knew challenging Jack outright could lead to dire consequences. The graying man spoke again, his tone more conciliatory. "Jack, we understand your position, but there must be a way to balance this without undermining the authority of the MBO." Jack took a deep breath, visibly calming himself. "All I ask is for fairness. Angie has been freed of the dark control. I witnessed it happen. Will the MBO not take my word for it? She has already been put through enough, and any further sequence would be a travesty of justice. I stand for justice regardless of the situation." The scientists began to whisper among themselves, their uncertainty evident. The auburn-haired woman stepped forward again. "What about the dark energy? Gustav has absorbed everything. She is free. He is the only one that I will allow you observe." Jack glanced at Gustav as the dark marks writhing across his unconscious form. "We need to understand how it affects him. He can be monitored until then, but not mistreated." The higher-ups huddled together, their voices low but urgent. After a tense few moments, the steely-eyed woman turned back to Jack. "We will agree to your terms, Jack. Angie will be placed under your care, and we will ensure that Gustav receives a fair trial. But we will not tolerate any further interference." Jack nodded as the tension in the room eased slightly. "That's all I ask." The restraints on Angie began to loosen, and she was finally freed. She rubbed her wrists with a slightly relieved expression. "Thank you, Jack." Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's all right. You should probably get a good look at him now, before you go. I doubt they will let you visit after this." The higher-ups and scientists slowly dispersed after Jack asked for a moment of privacy. As the room emptied, Jack and Angie stood by Gustav's side. Angie had a face full of emotions as she stared at him. "This is all my fault." Tears streaked down her cheeks as she reached out to touch Gustav's face. Chapter 1503, The Modified Narrative. Chapter 1503, The Modified Narrative, Author's Note. Unedited chapter. Gustav's consciousness drifted through a void of endless darkness. The inky blackness seemed to stretch on forever, punctuated only by a chilling silence that made him feel profoundly alone. His thoughts were interrupted by a sinister voice that echoed through the emptiness. Its tone was dripping with malice and mockery. "So, this is the grand outworldly. Reduced to floating in the abyss," the voice sneered. "How foolish the action you took was, Gustav." Gustav's eyes narrowed in the darkness. He had felt this presence ever since he assimilated Angie's form of darkness. It was a part of him now, but it wasn't welcome. "You're delusional if you think you can take control," Gustav retorted coolly. "I will assimilate you, dominate you. It's only a matter of time." A cold, mirthless laugh echoed through the void. "You think you can dominate the darkness that has existed since the beginning of time? Impossible even for you." "If I had a cent for every time someone told me something was impossible, I'd be a billionaire," Gustav stated with an unfettered tone. The voice seemed to shift, as if circling him like a predator. "Why waste your time protecting beings from a plane that has branded you a universal fugitive?" Gustav laughed in defiance. "I'm not doing it for them. I do it for my loved ones." "Ah, your loved ones," the voice mused with its tone dripping with sarcasm. "So if your loved ones were eliminated, you would stop being a protector." A surge of killing intent erupted from Gustav the moment he heard that. "I'll advise you to watch what you say because it could be the last thing you ever say." The sinister voice laughed again, this time with genuine amusement. "I have my answer. Your loved ones are your weakness." The surroundings in the physical world began to tremble. The containment facility shook, causing the scientists and MBO officers to struggle for breath. Angie, who was standing before him, felt the oppressive weight of Gustav's killing intent pressing down on her. She watched in horror as the facility seemed to buckle under the immense pressure. "What is going on?" All scientists fell to their knees, choking as the oppressiveness swept across the region. Meanwhile, back in the void, the voice vanished, leaving Gustav alone with his thoughts. The oppressive atmosphere lingered briefly before finally calming. In the physical realm, Jack stood before the scientists and MBO officers who had rushed back to the enclosure after the killing intent reduced. Whatever is happening to him, it's causing this instability. One of the scientists stepped forward. "Even his killing intent is powerful enough to cause death. We need to understand the nature of this dark energy. If we can isolate it, we might be able to stabilize him. He's fighting something terrible inside him. I couldn't win, but I believe he is stronger." "I will help however I can," Angie voiced from the side. Gustav's consciousness drifted into a meditative state, seeking to quell the unprecedented altercation of darkness spreading from the root of his core. The sinister voice that had taunted him earlier was a distant echo now. With every breath, Gustav focused on centering himself, drawing strength from the depths of his being. Meanwhile, Ealdris, Falco, and Endrick finally arrived at the location of the Alliance. The structure, shaped like a syringe, floated ominously in the vastness of space. At first, it seemed tiny, almost insignificant against a display of distant stars. But as their spacecraft drew closer, the structure began to expand, revealing its true size. White spatial lights cascaded down like a waterfall, bathing the surroundings in an ethereal glow. "This place is massive," Falco muttered, his eyes wide with awe. "I agree, but stay focused," Ealdris replied with a straight gaze. "Remember the plan." Their spacecraft approached the lights, and as it passed through, the scene before them transformed. They appeared inside a vast, bustling hub, filled with Alliance Corp members moving about with purpose. This vicinity didn't look like it had ceilings. The top was a view of space with glistening stars, twinkling, and distant galaxies. Protocols were being meticulously followed, with spacecraft coming in and out, each one undergoing thorough checks. "Identification, please," a stern-faced officer demanded to the Corp members ahead of the four. "We need to provide that rhombus-cubed identification," Ealdris said through their mind comms while glancing at the others. They had prepared for this, and each had a particular high-grade technological device in their possession, but the rhombus-shaped cube was still missing. He created miniature vortexes to discreetly consume the identification cubes from some unsuspecting Corp members who had just gone in. He handed the cubes to the rest of the group, just as it was their turn. Time Mirage. Endrick's index finger glowed as he twirled it slightly. Replicas of the identification cubes E had stolen appeared in the possession of the corp members he had taken them from. This way, they wouldn't know they fakes until the time limit of the ability was reached. Hopefully the group would be done with their business here by then. Although these cubes were specifically for personal identification data, the specialty of the secret tech in their possession would rewrite the data in the cube and make it to become theirs so they can appear on the Alliance Corp database. Another stern-faced officer approached them, scanning their faces with suspicion. Identification, please. Eldris, Falco, and Endrick presented their cubes with ease. The officer scanned each one, his gaze lingering on them for what felt like an eternity. The seconds stretched, and tension slowly began to build. "Welcome," the officer finally said, stepping aside. "Proceed." They reached a particular distance before exhaling collectively. "That was close," Endrick whispered. "Let's keep moving," Eldris urged while taking the lead. They followed the necessary proceedings, blending in with the other court members. Each step they took felt like walking a tightrope. The threat of discovery was ever present. The interior of the Alliance structure was a maze of corridors and chambers, each one more imposing than the last. The place where Alliance leaders held their meetings was at the far east, while the Alliance gatherings were held in a different position. The sights here were marvelous beyond words. It was like an extremely modern city floating in deep space. "We need to find out where they're holding Rhea," Falco said while his eyes scanned the area. Dietrich said, "Cell block Delt 7. "We need to find out where prisoners are kept first," Eldris chipped in. As they navigated through the Alliance, they encountered several checkpoints. At each one, they presented their stolen identification cubes, maintaining their cover. At one point, they nearly stumbled. A particularly vigilant officer scrutinized their identifications, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. He asked a series of probing questions, and for a moment, it seemed their cover was about to be blown. "Where were you stationed before this?" the officer demanded, his gaze sharp. "Sector 14 under Commander Vexus," Eldris replied smoothly with a steady tone. The officer's eyes flicked between them, weighing their words. The silence stretched, each second a heartbeat. "Very well," he said, finally stepping aside. "Proceed." They moved forward as the tension eased slightly. Every step felt like a gamble, but they pressed on, driven by the need to rescue Rhea. Eldris had overheard some court members discussing, and the name Commander Vexus came up. To save their cover, he had to use it. Finally, they reached a more secluded part of the complex, a section that seemed less frequented by the bustling court members. There were rectangular-shaped structures that looked like pillars reaching the very top. The rectangular-shaped structures were lined in rows, and one could move in between them. He glanced around as his eyes narrowed. "This looks like it might be the right place." "Yeah, but this is Block A." "I think we still need to move further in," Falco responded with narrowed eyes. Across the earth, news outlets were abuzz with breaking news. Gustav Crimson, the planet destroyer, had been captured. Headlines flashed across screens, and newscasters spoke with barely concealed excitement. Gustav Crimson, the most wanted fugitive in the universe, has finally been apprehended, one reporter announced, her tone triumphant. Thanks to the efforts of Jack, the most powerful mixed blood, the threat has been neutralized. As images of Gustav, restrained and in a darkened state, filled the screens, the narrative was clear. Gustav was the villain, and Jack was the hero. The masses, unaware of the true events that had unfolded, cheered the news. Their fear of Gustav's power had clouded their judgment. Meanwhile, in a quieter part of Plankton City, a far different story was unfolding. Angie, now fully human and free of the darkness that had consumed her, stood before a door. Her heart raced as she approached the door with her hands trembling in anticipation. Her parents hadn't seen her in over a year. She wondered how they would react, if they had moved on with their lives completely, or if she even still had a place here for worrying them all this time. Chapter 15. Oh, for the beatdown. Chapter 15. Oh, for the beatdown. Author's note. Unedited chapter. She decided to throw all of these thoughts to the back of her mind and proceeded to knock softly. Come, come, come. Her heart was in her throat as she waited. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing her mother. A look of shock and disbelief appeared on her slightly wrinkled face with visible eye bags. Angie, her mother whispered as tears welled up in her eyes. Mom, Angie replied as her voice slowly broke down. It's me. I'm home. Her mother let out a sob, immediately pulling Angie into a tight embrace. Oh, my baby! Mr. Villandrobadia appeared behind her mother with an expression of both shock and overwhelming relief. Angie, he repeated with an emotional tone. Is it really you? Angie nodded with tears streaming down her face. I'm home, Dad. I'm really home. They enveloped her in their arms, holding her as if they would never let go. The numerous months of worry, fear, and uncertainty melted away in that moment of reunion, replaced by the warmth of their love. We never gave up hope, her mother said with a trembling tone. Every day, we prayed that you one day find your way back to us. I'm sorry, Angie whispered, her voice filled with guilt. I'm so sorry for putting you and Dad through so much worry. Her mother cupped her face while looking into her eyes. You have nothing to apologize for, Angie. We know it wasn't your fault. The important thing is that you're back with us now, Angie's father said with a soft tone. They guided her inside, leading her to the living room where she sank into the familiar comfort of the couch. Her parents sat on either side of her, their hands never leaving hers, as if they needed the physical connection to believe she was truly there. Where have you been all this time? Her father asked gently. It's a long story, Angie replied with a disturbed look. I was trapped somewhere for a very long time. I didn't know if I'd ever see you again. Her mother squeezed her hand with tears streaming down her face. We're just so grateful that you're safe now. As they talked, the holographic television in the background continued to broadcast the news of Gustav's capture. Angie glanced at the screen, and her heart ached as she spotted this. She knew the truth of what had happened, the sacrifices Gustav had made. Seeing him painted as a villain was a bitter pill to swallow. Mom, Dad, she began with a steady voice. There's something I need to tell you about Gustav. He's not what they say he is. Her parents exchanged a worried glance, but nodded for her to continue. Gustav, he saved me, she revealed with a firm tone. He never stopped trying even when it seemed impossible. He sacrificed himself to make sure I could come back to you. Her father frowned with his brow furrowing. But the news, they say he's responsible for what happened at Aesop. For the destruction of the planet and your disappearance as well. Angie shook her head vehemently. They're wrong. Gustav fought to protect everyone. If anything, he should be getting praised because no one would have returned if it wasn't for him. He doesn't deserve what's happening to him. Her mother's face displayed a look of realization as she recalled what happened at their last encounter. We didn't treat him so well the last time, even when he promised to save you, she muttered with a remorseful look. He deserves an apology, even after everything that had been thrown at him. He still stuck to his word and saved you. Mr. Villandrobadia was equally as remorseful. Everyone really painted the narrative a different way when he is, in fact, a savior. I just wish there was a way to make everyone see the truth. Well, do whatever we can to help, Angie, her father said with a thoughtful gaze while placing a hand on her shoulder. They wanted to hear more on exactly all of Angie's experiences, but she wasn't interested in giving them full details. She didn't want to cause more panic than necessary. How could she ever let her parents, know that they were up against a literal being that could swallow up the face of this plane's existence. "Where is Phil?" Angie asked of her little brother. "He is in school," Angie's mother answered. "It's been too long." He must have grown bigger by now. A smile appeared on Angie's face as she thought of her brother. "He has. But before he returns, there is something you should know. Phil has been." In the bustling courtyard of Echelon High School, students milled about during their lunch break. The school, which was a blend of high-grade architecture and lush greenery, boasted spacious grounds and state-of-the-art facilities. Large trees provided shade over neatly manicured lawns, while pathways lined with flowers wound between buildings. This was the exact high school Gustav had graduated from about 4 years back. A tall and striking young man with silver hair and a unicorn-like horn protruding from his forehead stood near a group of his friends. Despite being only 16, and in his second year, his 6-foot-tall frame and slightly muscular build made him stand out. "Hey, Phil," a sneering voice called out. Phil turned to see Marcus, a year 3 senior, swaggering towards him with a group of cronies. Marcus was infamous for his bullying, using his bloodline abilities to intimidate others. Today his target was the infamous Phil of Echelon High. It would seem that he didn't care about the scary rumors he had heard about Phil. "Your sister, Angie, she's Gustav's whore, isn't she?" Marcus jeered, drawing the attention of the surrounding students. Phil's eyes narrowed as a surge of anger immediately flooded through him. "Take that back, Marcus." Marcus laughed, enjoying the reaction. "Why should I? Everyone knows Gustav's been captured and your sister has been gone for ages. What does that say about her?" The students around them murmured, watching the confrontation with growing interest. Among them, several girls couldn't help but admire Phil. He was said to be fiery and bold. Now they were seeing it in person. "Shut up!" Phil shouted while his horn began to glow with a silver light. "You don't know anything about my sister." "Oh, I know plenty," Marcus taunted. "I know she's probably dead or worse because she dated that fugitive. You're just as pathetic as she is." The insult pushed Phil over the edge. His body began to shift, muscles bulging, and silver fur sprouting all over his skin. His horn lengthened and sharpened, and his eyes took on a feral gleam. "Get ready to eat your words," Phil growled, his voice now a deep, rumbling snarl. Marcus' cronies stepped back, sensing the imminent fight. Marcus, however, grinned and raised his hands. Sheets of paper materialized around him, swirling in the air before forming into tightly controlled bombs. "You think you can take me on, beast boy?" Marcus sneered. Without another word, Phil charged. With his transformation complete, he was now a large beast covered in shimmering silver fur. His horn crackled with energy as he moved with surprising speed for his size, closing the distance between them in an instant. Marcus hurled a volley of paper bombs at Phil, each one exploding with a deafening bang. Phil roared in pain as the blasts tore into his fur and skin, sending him flying across the air. Phil rammed into a tree, but didn't stay down for a single second before charging forward again. "Oh, that didn't take you down." "Hey, race more," Marcus voiced while swiping his fingers forward continuously. Boom, boom, boom. Controlled explosions with a tiny range but very effective damage rang out across the place. However, it looked like Phil had suddenly developed some kind of tolerance as he kept pushing further despite getting hit with these powerful blasts. Impossible. He should have lost a limb by now. Marcus couldn't believe his eyes as he cranked up the explosions. He hadn't heard of Phil's ferocity. Phil's powerful legs propelled him forward, and he lashed out with a swipe of his massive clawed hand. Marcus barely managed to dodge, the claws grazing his arm and leaving deep gashes. Blood spattered the ground, and Marcus' grin faltered. "You're going to regret that," Marcus hissed, launching more paper bombs. Phil's horn glowed brighter, and he shot a beam of silver energy from its tip. The beam cut through the air, intercepting the paper bombs and causing them to explode prematurely. The force of the explosions pushed Marcus back, and he stumbled, his control wavering. Phil seized the opportunity, leaping into the air and descending hard on Marcus. His claws raked across Marcus' chest, and he followed up with a powerful headbutt as his horn cracked against Marcus' skull. Marcus cried out in pain as a long bloody line appeared on his head, but he wasn't done yet. With a desperate effort, he summoned a massive sheet of paper and wrapped it around Phil, trying to suffocate him. Phil roared, thrashing wildly with his claws, tearing at the paper. Chapter 1505, Phil's Newfound Conviction. Chapter 1505, Phil's Newfound Conviction, Author's Note. Unedited. Chapter. The students watching from the sidelines gasped, their admiration for Phil growing as they witnessed this. Dash! I've heard of how he beats boys older than him up, but I've never witnessed it. Dash, he is so hot. Several girls whispered excitedly to each other, their crushes on him solidifying as they watched him fight. Phil's rage and strength peaked, and he shredded the paper cocoon. With a final, ferocious roar, he lunged at the battered Marcus, pinning him to the ground. His claws dug into Marcus' shoulders, and he bared his teeth in a snarl. "Apologize," Phil growled, his voice barely human. "Take back what you said about my sister." Bloodied and beaten, Marcus looked up at Phil with fear in his eyes. Okay, I take it back. I'm sorry." Phil hesitated for a moment while letting out heavy breaths. Then, with a final growl, he released Marcus and stepped back. His form slowly returned to normal. His silver fur receded, and his horn returned to its usual size. Marcus lay on the ground, clutching his wounds and glaring up at Phil. "You'll pay for this," he spat, but his voice lacked the conviction it had before. Phil ignored him, turning away and walking towards the edge of the courtyard. The students parted to let him through. Their faces were filled with respect. Among them, several girls watched him go, while some approached, but he completely ignored them with a disinterested look. "This is all your fault, Gustav," Phil roared in his mind as he walked away. He didn't mind the injuries on his body as well. He moved to a secluded location and sat with a pensive look of sadness. "Big sister, just where are you?" He had no idea that Angie had returned. Back at the courtyard, teachers arrived, dispersing the crowd and tending to Marcus' injuries. The whole school would soon hear about the fight, but Phil didn't care. Phil sat in the principal's office, his hands clenched into fists on his lap. Principal McGregor, an older man with thinning gray hair and a stern expression, peered at him over the rim of his glasses. The office was adorned with awards and certificates. It had an air of authority that made students uncomfortable. "Phil, fighting on school grounds is strictly prohibited unless during monitored trainings," Principal McGregor said with a firm tone. Phil took a deep breath, trying to steady his anger. "Marcus was talking trash about my sister. He called her Gustav's whore and said she was probably dead because of him." Principal McGregor's expression softened slightly but remained resolute. "I understand that you were upset, Phil, but you should have reported the incident to a teacher." "Pfft, reported? Like, y'all don't lick the asses of his father. Y'all won't do shit, so I took matters into my own hands." Phil's anger burst through like a dam. "Watch your tone, young man," Principal McGregor voiced as his smile vanished. "TCH." Phil folded his arms and tried to calm himself. Resorting to violence only escalates the situation. As it stands, you will have to face the consequences of your actions, Principal McGregor stated. Phil's shoulders slumped in defeat. What kind of punishment? "You will serve a week with manual workers and write a formal apology to Marcus," Principal McGregor stated. "Furthermore, you will be required to attend anger management sessions." Phil nodded, knowing there was no point in arguing. "Is that all?" The principal gave a curt nod. You're dismissed. Make sure you think about your actions and how to handle such situations better in the future. Phil left the office without uttering another word. The day had been exhausting, and all he wanted was to go home. As he exited the school building and headed to the hover bus stop, he couldn't shake off his frustration. Phil boarded an hover bus and found an empty seat by the window. The streets were filled with people, hover cars, and various advertisements on large digital screens as usual. As the bus glided smoothly through the city, Phil's eyes were drawn to one of the giant screens displaying breaking news. Gustav's face appeared on the screen, and a news anchor's voice echoed through the bus. Gustav, the infamous fugitive, has been captured and is currently being held at a high-security facility. Authorities praised Jack for the successful capture, and citizens are urged to remain vigilant. Phil's already knew of the news, but his jaw tightened and his fists clenched again. "This is all because of you, Gustav," he muttered under his breath. "If it weren't for you, Angie wouldn't have disappeared." The bus continued its journey, and Phil tried to push the thoughts away. As he neared his neighborhood, he thought of Angie once more and sighed. He stepped off the bus and walked down the familiar streets, lost in his thoughts. When he turned the corner onto his street, he saw a figure standing near their house. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized the silhouette. Angie stood there with her long silver and pink hair blowing gently in the breeze. He had never seen it get this long, because Angie was fond of cutting it, which made it harder for him to believe his eyes. "Big sister." Phil's voice cracked as he called out her name. Angie's face lit up with a smile, and she rushed towards him. "Phil." Phil ran to her, and they embraced tightly, both overwhelmed with emotion. Tears gathered in Phil's eyes as he held his sister in joy and disbelief. "I thought I'd never see you again," Phil whispered. Angie held him tighter with a slightly surprised expression due to his height. "I'm here now, Phil. I'm back." They pulled back slightly, and Phil looked at her with a mixture of awe and confusion. "What happened? Where have you been all this time?" Angie took a deep breath. "It's a long story, Phil. Let's go inside." They walked into the house, and Phil's heart felt lighter than it had in months. Inside, their parents were elated that the whole family was back together again. After the initial excitement settled, Angie noticed the injuries on Phil's cheeks that hadn't healed and asked him what happened. "Got into a fight," Phil answered bluntly. Angie placed a hand on his shoulder. "Yeah, you gotta stop doing that. Mom and Dad told me everything." Phi looked a bit embarrassed as he turned to stare at his parents, sitting at a corner. His eyes screamed, "Why did you tell her?" It turned out that Phil had been getting into a lot of fights since his sister disappeared and Gustav was branded a fugitive. Everyone was well aware that his sister was dating Angie, so a lot of times they came up with false and insulting narratives to poke at him. Phil's mood had turned terrible after the loss of Angie. He had a very bad temper and dealt with everything using his fists. He even sometimes got into scuffles in the neighborhood and with his parents sometimes. If you're looking for remorse, you won't find one here. I don't regret beating all those people up. Phil folded his arms in defiance. "When did you get so cheeky?" Angie pulled Hugh's cheeks, finding his expression adorable. "Ouch!" Phil rubbed his cheeks with a pout. "I'm not asking you to be remorseful. Just learn to control your anger. You don't need to be physical all the time. On a side note, thank you for standing up for me." Angie displayed a sweet smile. "Reminds me of Gustav. This is exactly how hot-headed he was back then." Angie chuckled slightly as she added, "Don't compare me to that fugitive." Phil jumped up in anguish. "Isn't he the reason you disappeared in the first place?" he added. Angie sat Phil down with a pull and decided to give him a brief explanation of what had happened. She left out a lot of things but gave him the same level of information that her parents received, so as not to cause too much panic. "Gustav, he saved me. He risked everything to bring me back and free me from the control," Angie said with an emotional look. Phil's face fell in guilt. "So, Gustav isn't the villain everyone thinks he is?" Angie shook her head. "No, he isn't. He's been branded a fugitive because people don't understand. The government and media is controlling the narrative. Phil sat back, processing everything. I can't believe it. I blamed him for your disappearance. Even the fight at school today was because they insulted you using Gustav. I am trying to get the charges off him and change the narrative. After all he has done, the world shouldn't be against him. Angie leaned back with a sigh. Phil nodded in understanding and newfound determination eyes. I will. I'll do whatever it takes to help him. Within a dark space, Gustav's consciousness floated with closed eyes. After this isolation, I should be able to contact someone in the outside world. I need to be quick, or it will be too late to save them. Chapter 1506, Ethereal Impossibility. Chapter 1506, Ethereal Impossibility, Author's Note. Do not unlock, just do it, Stark mumbled. Memory's siphoning has been activated. As Gustav activated the ability, a rush of images and sensations flooded through him. The first memory was Stark touching the ancient pamphlet, his fingers trembling as he made contact. Instantly, a deluge of visions cascaded into Stark's consciousness, visions now shared with Gustav. The scenes were chaotic and intense. Gustav, riding the warp demolator, unwittingly triggers a cataclysmic event. With the warp demolator instability, which somewhat had something to do with Gustav's involvement in its movement, a fragmented trails of ashiness breaks off from the pile and ends up appearing on Earth. The Vertigan premises, to be exact. A corruption is unleashed, enveloping everything in its path. Gustav finds himself ensnared in the location he ends up after riding the ARP demolator, unable to escape and come give assistance as disaster unfolds. The Vertigan Island is on fire. In order to stop the corruption from spreading further, the world comes together to wipe them out. The lineage of the Vertigan family, once proud and influential, withers and blaze, their legacy reduced to ashes. A fragment of another memory shows a later scene. A devastated Gustav, his face etched with defeat and sorrow, carrying the lifeless body of Stark through the remnants of what was once a vibrant island. The weight of his failure, the destruction of a family he inadvertently caused, hangs heavily on him. Gustav pulls away from Stark at this moment with a look of distress as his mind returns to the present. So it's true. I told you. I needed you to see it, to understand why I did what I did. I couldn't let that future come to pass. Stark breathed profusely while trying to recover from the siphon's toll. Gustav stood in place with a contemplative look while the impact of the visions still toiled through his mind. While I get it, I can't just accept that outcome. There must be something that can be done to change it. That's one of the reasons I brought you here, away from the demolator. Not just to protect my family, but to give us a chance to find another way. Together. I understand it is paramount for you to get to where the warp demolator is heading, Stark voiced with a hopeful tone. And if we can't find another way, what then? We sacrifice everything and everyone else just to save your family? Gustav questioned with a tinge of annoyance. If it was you, what would you have done? Stark asked while lowering his head. This question caused a brief silence as Gustav pictured choosing between saving his loved ones and saving the world. Let's not pretend that you wouldn't fuck the world over to save your friends. The system chipped in. Whose side are you on? The side of reason. You know the meaning of that word? Did you Google it? Fuck you. Gustav decided to ignore the system and turn to face Stark. You better pray that we find another way. For everyone's sake, Gustav tone hinted at accepting the collaboration. Stark looked at Gustav, his eyes solemn, understanding the enormity of the choices before them. Thank you for giving me a chance. As the warp demolator receded into the void of space, leaving behind a trail of cosmic unrest, Endrick, Ealdris, Falco, and Rhea remained aboard their spacecraft, their faces etched with concern and confusion. They had expected Gustav to appear at the last moment or something, but his absence now cast a shadow over their mission. Now the warp demolator was gone. Rhea, staring out into the now calm space, broke the silence. Gustav, he's definitely okay, right? His voice carried a mixture of hope and worry. He has to be. Gustav survived worse. But with his disappearance, and without the warp demolator taking him to where planet Humbad Remnants is located, I'm not sure what our next move should be, Eldris chipped in. Endrick then recalled the mysterious being that had intervened during their most perilous moment. The figure's glowing silhouette had prevented a disaster, but its identity remained a puzzle. Endrick, rubbing his chin thoughtfully, ventured, that being. Could it have been Miss Amy? It reminded me of her. Rhea raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Miss Amy? Didn't she retreat to that planet she created after the ice op? Why would she appear here, and in the warp demolator of all places? Eldris, nodding slowly, added, It surely makes no sense for it to be her, since the being appeared from the interior of the warp demolator. But then, the discussion spiraled into theories and recounts of Miss Amy's known capabilities and last known actions. Her legend as one of the universe's most formidable beings made her a subject of endless speculation. Falco, trying to make sense of the events, suggested, as much as it seems unlikely, who else could rip us away from the pull of something as powerful as the warp demolator, and then to dive back into it? That's not something just anyone could do, even if they were alpha ranked, and she is beyond that level of power, Eldris added. Eldris initiated the emergency thrusters, the spacecraft's engines roaring to life as they attempted to aid Endrick's telekinetic push. The combined effort caused the ship to tremble violently, straining against the immense gravitational force of the warp demolator. Thrusters at full power. Outside, the warp demolator seemed almost alive, its ashy, serpentine body writhing and expanding as it consumed the cosmic matter in its path. The spectacle was terrifying. Orbital bodies that had taken eons to form are now mere playthings in the grip of this celestial behemoth. As the spacecraft struggled to maintain its position, the crew watched helplessly as the warp demolator's path of travel became increasingly erratic. The situation aboard the spacecraft grew increasingly dire as the warp demolator's gravitational pull intensified beyond Endrick's capacity to manage. His telekinetic shield shimmered with strain, the protective energy waning as the colossal entity grew even larger, its ashy tendrils swirling menacingly closer. Endrick's face contorted with effort and sweat beading on his brow, gritted his teeth. I can't hold it much longer. It's too strong. He didn't have this much struggle splitting an entire planet, but who knew something like this could be so difficult? Endrick wanted to make sure direct contact was not made because none of them were aware of what effects it would bring, but as things were. It's growing. We're not going to make it if it gets much closer, Eldris announced with a tone of urgency. The crew braced themselves as the spacecraft began to shudder violently, the edges of the warp demolator's ashy trail licking the outer hull, enveloping them in darkness. It seemed as though they would be consumed whole by the cosmic phenomenon they had sought to intercept. Falco was preparing to head out there and brace the warp demolator with his bare body so as to push them from harm's way, but Eldris and Rhea were not having it. There was no way he'd be able to handle such. Suddenly, a miraculous sight unfolded. From the heart of the ashy chaos, a brilliant silver glow emerged, its radiance piercing through the darkness like a celestial beacon. An ethereal being, its form obscured by the intense luminosity it emitted, approached the spacecraft. The crew watched in awe and confusion as the glowing entity reached out with what appeared to be arms of pure light. With a graceful, powerful motion, the being pushed against the spacecraft. The force of its intervention was gentle yet firm, countering the pull of the warp demolator with a precision that seemed beyond the capabilities of any known entity. What in the universe is that? Falco couldn't hide his shock. As the being exerted its influence, the spacecraft felt the oppressive, ashy grip loosening. Slowly, but with undeniable strength, the ethereal figure maneuvered them away from the belly of the warp demolator. The ash receded from the hull, revealing once again the stars beyond. The silver being, its task seemingly complete, gave one last push that sent the spacecraft into a stable path away from the destructive path of the warp demolator. As it withdrew, the glow around it pulsated warmly and almost reassuringly. "A day ago! Just check my memories if you think I'm lying. The visions will prove my claim," amidst heavy breaths Stark suggested. Gustav's grip on Stark's neck loosened as he contemplated the suggestion to delve into Stark's memories. The revelation that Stark knew about his rarely used ability to siphon memories was unsettling. This power, known to wreak havoc on the mind of the person it was used on, and it seemed Stark knew more about the existence of the outworldly than he thought. Stark's insistence and the gravity of the situation prompted Gustav's acceptance. He never spared his enemies, but he was looking for a reason to give Stark the benefit of the doubt. Gustav placed his hand firmly on Stark's temple, while Stark braced himself, closing his eyes in anticipation of the invasive probe. "This is gonna hurt," Gustav stated with an emotionless tone. Chapter 1507 on site. Chapter 1507 on site. Author's note. Do not unlock. Some had weapons, while others had activated their supernatural abilities, ready to face the group. Falco stepped forward as his body emanated a dark aura. "Like hell we will." With a wave of his hand, Falco summoned tendrils of dark energy that lashed out towards the approaching guards. The tendrils smashed into the ground, causing the floor to crack and the guards to scatter. He was already thinking ahead. "We need to find another way out. There's no way we can fight all of them head-on." Endrick nodded, his mind racing. "Follow me." "SS, honestly, it's hard to say what we'll find. Miss Amy is unpredictable, but if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's that she's continued creating life. She aims to craft a world far different from Earth's, full of diversity and harmony." Gustav responded with a reminiscent look. As they boarded the spacecraft, the bodyguards took their positions at the controls, and Gustav settled next to Stark. The bay doors slowly retracted. With a smooth surge of power, the spacecraft lifted off, leaving Earth's atmosphere in a streak of light. As they ascended, Gustav's mind drifted to his past interactions with Miss Amy. He remembered the lush landscapes she had shown him, teeming with life, creatures of her own design, each species more fascinating than the last. Miss Amy stood before a sprawling vista, her hand sweeping over a field dotted with two-headed creatures grazing under a colorful sky. "Here," she had said, "I will create a sanctuary where all the life forms I create can coexist in balance, a model of what any world could be, free from strife and inequality." Gustav felt a pang of nostalgia and a deep-seated curiosity about how much her world had evolved since his last visit. He pulled himself back to the present as their ship broke free from Earth's gravitational pull and entered the open cosmos. "Space travel still amazes me every time," Stark mumbled while peering forward. With his eyes, he could see every nook and cranny of the exterior of the spacecraft. "How far until we reach Agon?" Gustav questioned. "We're looking at just over a day's journey with the current hyperdrive settings, since Agon is situated at the edge of the Milky Way," Stark answered informatively. The journey through space was smooth, with the vast starlit void offering a display of serene beauty. Stark occasionally attempted to draw out more stories from Gustav, who remained somewhat reticent, lost in his thoughts. "You really respect her, don't you?" "Miss Amy, I mean." "More than respect, Stark. I owe her my life. I was hoping I wouldn't need her help anymore until all this was over, but I guess there is no other way," Gustav voiced with a look of admiration and perturbation. As they neared Agon, the planet's image began to fill the viewport, a colossal world, its surface swirling with vibrant colors and cloud patterns that hinted at its dynamic atmosphere. "There it is, Agon," Gustav announced. "Wow, it truly is 4 times the size of Earth. Very breathtaking. To think one being could create all this. It's beyond what I thought possible." Stark couldn't imagine just how powerful Miss Amy was. Although he had very much witnessed her might at Aesop, it was an entirely different scenario to physically be in the presence of an orbital body she created. The spacecraft's approach was carefully calculated as they prepared for descent. As their spacecraft approached the vibrant, swirling atmosphere of Agon, Gustav and Stark were suddenly jolted by an unexpected resistance. A shimmering barrier, invisible until now, materialized just as their ship was about to enter the planet's orbit. Stark, startled by the sudden halt, looked over at Gustav with concern. "What's happening? Why can't we move forward?" Gustav's brow furrowed in confusion and surprise, responded, This wasn't here before. Miss Amy must have later put this in place to prevent external entry. But she should be aware of my presence by now. Why isn't she taking the barrier down?" Gustav wondered out loud. It was impossible for anything to pass Miss Amy by since she became a goddess, so Gustav expected her to have sensed their spacecraft long before it got to this point. Trying to understand the situation, Gustav instructed the ship's AI to attempt a gentle push forward, but the barrier remained impassive, its surface repelling every advance with increasing force. "Let's not force it. We might damage the ship, or worse, trigger a countermeasure we're not prepared for." Uncle Bila watched in amazement as Gustav interacted with the newly revived NID. The artifact, long dormant and silent within the depths of the Vertigan vaults, now pulsed with a vibrant, mystical energy. "Mr. Crimson, to use TH. Don't worry, I understand how it works." Gustav cut Uncle Bila off. He proceeded to place his palm flat against the NID, and the device responded immediately, its surface shimmering with an ethereal glow. The rhythmic pulsing seemed to sync with Gustav's own energy, creating a resonance that filled the room with a palpable sense of anticipation. Gustav's thoughts were singular. "I need to find a way to get to the remnants of planet Humbad." He held onto this intention, willing the NID to provide a path forward. After a tense few moments, the artifact responded. A projection of shimmering letters floated in the air before them. "Planet Agon. ****. Gustav stepped back, his surprise evident. "Agon? That's the name Miss Amy calls her planet." The room fell silent as the NID powered down, its task seemingly complete. Uncle Bila, breaking the silence, confirmed what the machine had implied. "It seems that whatever you need, Gustav, is tied to planet Agon." According to our ancestors, the NID has never been wrong. Gustav, puzzled, murmured to himself, "But why there? What could possibly be on Miss Amy's planet that relates to Humbad or the Warp Demolator?" Miss Amy's planet was still a very new one, so it didn't make any sense to him. Stark chimed in, "Remember, Miss Amy isn't just your former master. She's a creator of worlds, a manipulator of cosmic scales. There is every possibility that she has foresight of the current predicament." The idea resonated with Gustav, but he was still skeptical about it. "You might be right. I guess the only way to find out is by heading there." "I'll arrange for transport," Stark voiced in response. "And I'll gather some supplies for your journey," Uncle Bila added. "I need to find a way to send a message." "An intergalactic message," Gustav requested. Days had passed since the Warp Demolator's appearance and subsequent disappearance, leaving Aeldris and Drick, Falco, and Rhea adrift in uncertainty. They had been scouring the coordinates and searching for any trace of Gustav, their efforts fruitless and their morale dwindling. As they prepared to set a course for a nearby planet in hopes of finding assistance, the console beeped loudly, signaling an incoming transmission that immediately drew their attention. Falco, who was closest to the console, quickly tapped to accept the transmission. The familiar face of Gustav appeared in full vibrancy. Hey guys. The group exchanged looks of relief mixed with confusion upon his appearance. Rival. We've searched everywhere. Where did you vanish to? Ria was the first to yell out. I'm on Earth, Gustav revealed. You're on Earth. How did you end up there? Falco voiced in shock. It's Stark's doing. It's a long story I'll fill you in later. But I'm all right. We thought we lost you. How are you going to get back? Eldris inquired. I'm not coming back just yet. I'm actually about to head to Miss Amy's planet, Augon. This revelation prompted a round of surprised murmurs among the group. Miss Amy's planet? Why? Endrick voiced in bafflement. It's related to something called the NID, an artifact that pointed me to Augon. I think it's crucial for what comes next. Since I missed the warp demolator's appearance, this might be the only way I get to planet Humbad. The group listened intently as Gustav briefly explained his encounter with the NID and its mysterious guidance. So, what do you need us to do now? Head to the Milky Way to join you? Eldris inquired. No, that won't be necessary. You're over a month away, and I can't have you trailing behind that long. Instead, I need you to fix up my ship. I believe by the time you're heading back, I would have gotten what I need. Okay, we could help with other things while you do what needs to be done, Endrick answered with a nod. Thanks. I'll keep you posted on my progress and what I find out on Augon. As the transmission faded, the crew sat back, processing the flurry of information. Gustav was safe, but the journey ahead was his alone to tread for now. They turned their attention to the task at hand, repairing Gustav's spacecraft and finding their way back without mishaps. We're gonna head for Earth afterwards, right? Ria asked. You bet we are. Gustav and Stark stood in the dimly lit hangar, their spacecraft prepped and ready for departure. The air thrummed with the low rumble of the engines warming up, a subtle vibration underfoot that spoke of the power at their disposal. Beside them, two bodyguards in silver robes, their features obscured by the high collars and hoods, stood silent and alert. Gustav, checking over his own disguise, a similar silver robe that masked his identity, nodded to Stark. It's time to go. Although Gustav didn't shape-shift due to the numbers seeing Stark off, he wouldn't shy out of it when the time came. Stark, adjusting his own gear, looked at Gustav with a mix of excitement and apprehension. What should I expect out there, Gustav? It's not every day one travels to a planet crafted by a goddess. Chapter 1508 ONS. Chapter 1508 ONS. Author's note. Do not unlock. Falco staggered back as his vision plunged into darkness. Falco! Endrick shouted while extending his hand to use telekinesis. He attempted to hurl Axaroth away, but his power rebounded off the Alliance leader, ineffective. Axaroth smirked, not even needing to move as he sent a forceful wave that smashed into Endrick, launching him across the room and into a wall with a sickening thud. Eldris transformed the environment into a kaleidoscope of shifting colors. He attempted to trap Axaroth in a prism of vibrant hues, a prison of light and color meant to immobilize. You're not invincible, Axaroth, he declared. Axaroth merely chuckled, his multiple limbs flexing as he shattered the colorful prison with ease. Pathetic, he growled while sprinting forward. He grabbing Eldris by the head and slammed him into the ground before he could react. The impact reverberated through the entire Alliance, causing its very foundation in space to tremble. Meanwhile, E had been struggling to open vortexes in the right places. Come on, he muttered as sweat gathered around his brow. Vortexes would appear in places that he didn't intend to open them in. The spatial disruption in the surroundings was no joke. As Axaroth turned his attention to him, E succeeded in creating a vortex that materialized from within one of Axaroth's right leg. Half of Axarov's right leg was immediately consumed. Axarov's roar of pain and fury echoed through the hall. "You'll pay for that, child!" he bellowed as blood jetted out from his severed limb. He surged forward as his remaining limbs propelled him with terrifying speed toward E, who began jumping from vortex to evade. Falco, despite his blindness, tried to help. He lashed out with whips of dark energy, each strike vicious and wild. "I am not done!" he screamed with pain. The dark energy ripped through the air, severing Alliance Corps members in two, with their screams mingling in the chaos. Falco was still holding back, so as not to put the others in danger, and right now more than ever he couldn't go all out. Axarov blocked the dark energy with his limbs as his focus split. He aimed to finish off Falco, but Endrick and E combined their efforts to prevent him. Endrick used his telekinesis to hurl debris and create barriers, while E managed to create vortexes to redirect Axarov's attacks. The battle raged on. The room was filled with the sounds of clashing powers and anguished cries. Axarov's strength seemed insurmountable as he brutalized the group with devastating strikes. He caught Endrick with a powerful blow, sending him sprawling to the ground, blood pouring from a deep gash on his side. Ealdris became barely conscious as he tried to summon his strength to help, but was crushed under the weight of Axarov's relentless assault. Falco body, trembling from blood loss and pain, continued to whip his dark energy in desperate arcs. But not of the attacks missed Axarov, since Falco couldn't exactly aim well with missing eyes. Fortunately, two more of Axarov's arms were sliced off, but not before he grabbed Falco's throat to end him. "You've lost!" Axarov hissed in pain while tightening his grip. E, seeing Falco in mortal danger, unleashed a vortex from Axarov's waist, severing the powerful Alliance leader in two. "How dare you!" Axarov, too, fell to the sides as a fountain of silver blood splurged out. He was still very much alive due to his strength, but his danger level had considerably decreased. Just as it seemed they might gain the upper hand, two more Alliance leaders arrived, their presence as intimidating as Axarov's. One, a towering figure with skin like molten metal, wielded a blade that crackled with electric energy. The other, a slender alien with eyes that glowed like burning coals, commanded an aura of immense psychic power. "We're not finished yet." Endrick gasped, blood trickling from his mouth as he struggled to his feet. But it was too late. The combined might of the three Alliance leaders overwhelmed them. Ealdris was impaled through the shoulder by the electric blade, his scream of pain cutting through the air. Endrick, trying to protect him, was caught by a psychic blast that shattered his left leg, leaving him crumpled on the ground. Falco, blinded and bleeding, was finally subdued by a crushing blow that knocked him unconscious. E, his energy depleted, was the last to fall. He fought valiantly, using every ounce of his strength to create vortexes and teleport around the room. But Axarov's speed and the combined efforts of the other leaders proved too much. E was struck down by a powerful psychic wave, his body crashing to the floor, barely conscious. "Secure them," Axarov commanded, his voice cold and unyielding. The Alliance Corps moved in, binding the battered and broken group with energy restraints. As they were dragged away, the last thing they saw was the grim satisfaction on Axarov's face. "You thought you could challenge the Alliance? Pathetic." The facility returned to a tense silence, the aftermath of the battle a stark reminder of the power they faced. The Alliance leaders watched as their prisoners were taken to the holding cells, knowing that this was only the beginning of their ordeal. "This isn't working," E shouted. "We need a new plan." The leader advanced, his energy growing more intense with each step. "It's over. Surrender now, and I might spare your lives." Endrick glanced at his friends, knowing they were running out of options. "We can't give up. There has to be a way." Just as the leader prepared to deliver a final, devastating blow, Endrick remembered something. Falco, Eldris, remember what we learned during training. Combine our attacks. Falco, despite his injuries, nodded. Let's do it. Eldris, his eyes glowing brighter than ever, focused his energy. On my mark. 1, 2, 3. The three of them unleashed their powers simultaneously. Endrick's telekinesis, Falco's dark energy, and Eldris' light manipulation merged into a single, powerful blast aimed directly at the leader. The combined attack struck the leader's shield, and for a moment it held firm. But then cracks began to appear, and the shield shattered under the pressure. The leader staggered back, momentarily stunned. He seized the opportunity, opening a vortex directly beneath the leader. Go. The leader fell through the vortex, and quickly closed it, transporting the leader to a distant, uninhabited part of the facility. That won't hold him for long, but it should buy us some time. They hurried towards their spacecraft, their movements fueled by adrenaline and determination. The alarms were still blaring, and they knew more enemies would be on their tail soon. As they approached their ship, they encountered another group of guards. But this time, their resolve was unshakable. Endrick used his telekinesis to clear a path. Falco covered their rear with dark energy blasts, and Eldris used his light manipulation to create barriers and disorient their attackers. Reached the ship first, opening the hatch and ushering everyone inside. Come on, let's get out of here. They piled into the spacecraft, and took the controls, lifting off just as more guards arrived. The ship shot out of the hangar, dodging energy blasts and weaving through the facility's defenses. We're not out of the woods yet, Endrick said, glancing at the sensors. We need to get clear of the facility's range. Nodded, his focus intense. Working on it. As they soared through space, the facility's defenses continued to target them. But E.'s skillful piloting kept them just ahead of the attacks. Finally, they broke free of the facility's range and entered hyperspace, leaving their pursuers behind. They collapsed into their seats, exhausted but relieved. We did it, Eldris said, a faint smile on his face. Endrick nodded. Yeah, but we can't rest yet. We still need to figure out our next move. Falco leaned back, his expression serious. We have Rias' location now. We need to regroup and come up with a new plan to rescue him. Glanced at the navigation controls, setting a course for a safe rendezvous point. First things first, let's find a place to lay low and recover. Then we can figure out our next steps. As the ship hurtled through hyperspace, they knew their mission was far from over, but they had each other, and that gave them the strength to keep fighting. SSS, and I'll gather some supplies for your journey, Uncle Bila added. I need to find a way to send a message. An intergalactic message, Gustav requested. Days had passed since the warp demolator's appearance and subsequent disappearance, leaving Eldris, Endrick, Falco, and Ria adrift in uncertainty. They had been scouring the coordinates and searching for any trace of Gustav, their efforts fruitless and their morale dwindling. As they prepared to set a course for a nearby planet in hopes of finding assistance, the console beeped loudly, signaling an incoming transmission that immediately drew their attention. Falco, who was closest to the console, quickly tapped to accept the transmission. The familiar face of Gustav appeared in full vibrancy. Hey guys. The group exchanged looks of relief, mixed with confusion upon his appearance. Rival, we've searched everywhere. Where did you vanish to? Ria was the first to yell out. I'm on Earth, Gustav revealed. You're on Earth. How did you end up there? Falco voiced in shock. It's Stark's doing. It's a long story, I'll fill you in later. But I'm all right. We thought we lost you. How are you going to get back? Eldris inquired. I'm not coming back just yet. I'm actually about to head to Miss Amy's planet, Argon. This revelation prompted a round of surprised murmurs among the group. Miss Amy's planet? Why? Endrick voiced in bafflement. Dash, it's related to something called the NID, an artifact that pointed me to Agon. I think it's crucial for what comes next. Since I missed the warp demolator's appearance, this might be the only way I get to planet Humbad. The group listened intently as Gustav briefly explained his encounter with the NID and its mysterious guidance. So, what do you need us to do now? Head to the Milky Way to join you? Eldris inquired. Dash, no, that won't be necessary. You're over a month away, and I can't have you trailing behind that long. Instead, I need you to fix up my ship. I believe by the time you're heading back, I would have gotten what I need. Okay, we could help with other things while you do what needs to be done, Endrick answered with a nod. Dash, thanks. I'll keep you posted on my progress and what I find out on Agon. As the transmission faded, the crew sat back, processing the flurry of information. Gustav was safe, but the journey ahead was his alone to tread for now. They turned their attention to the task at hand, repairing Gustav's spacecraft and finding their way back without mishaps. We're gonna head for Earth afterwards, right? Rhea asked. You bet we are. Gustav and Stark stood in the dimly lit hangar, their spacecraft prepped and ready for departure. The air thrummed with the low rumble of the engines warming up, a subtle vibration underfoot that spoke of the power at their disposal. Beside them, two bodyguards in silver robes, their features obscured by the high collars and hoods, stood silent and alert. Gustav, checking over his own disguise, a similar silver robe that masked his identity, nodded to Stark. It's time to go. Although Gustav didn't shape-shift due to the numbers seeing Stark off, he wouldn't shy out of it when the time came. Stark, adjusting his own gear, looked at Gustav with a mix of excitement and apprehension. What should I expect out there, Gustav? It's not every day one travels to a planet crafted by a goddess. Honestly, it's hard to say what we'll find. Miss Amy is unpredictable, but if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's that she's continued creating life. She aims to craft a world far different from Earth's. Full of diversity and harmony, Gustav responded with a reminiscent look. As they boarded the spacecraft, the bodyguards took their positions at the controls, and Gustav settled next to Stark. The bay doors slowly retracted. With a smooth surge of power, the spacecraft lifted off, leaving Earth's atmosphere in a streak of light. As they ascended, Gustav's mind drifted to his past interactions with Miss Amy. He remembered the lush landscapes she had shown him, teeming with life, creatures of her own design, each species more fascinating than the last. Miss Amy stood before a sprawling vista, her hand sweeping over a field dotted with two-headed creatures grazing under a colorful sky. Here, she had said, I will create a sanctuary where all the life forms I create can coexist in balance, a model of what any world could be, free from strife and inequality. Gustav felt a pang of nostalgia and a deep-seated curiosity about how much her world had evolved since his last visit. He pulled himself back to the present as their ship broke free from Earth's gravitational pull and entered the open cosmos. Space travel still amazes me every time, Stark mumbled while peering forward. With his eyes, he could see every nook and cranny of the exterior of the spacecraft. How far until we reach Agon? Gustav questioned. We're looking at just over a day's journey with the current hyperdrive settings since Agon is situated at the edge of the Milky Way, Stark answered informatively. The journey through space was smooth, with the vast starlit void offering a display of serene beauty. Stark occasionally attempted to draw out more stories from Gustav, who remained somewhat reticent, lost in his thoughts. You really respect her, don't you? Miss Amy, I mean. More than respect, Stark. I owe her my life. I was hoping I wouldn't need her help anymore until all this was over, but I guess there is no other way, Gustav voiced with a look of admiration and perturbation. As they neared Agon, the planet's image began to fill the viewport, a colossal world, its surface swirling with vibrant colors and cloud patterns that hinted at its dynamic atmosphere. There it is, Argon, Gustav announced. Wow, it truly is 4 times the size of Earth. Very breathtaking. To think one being could create all this. It's beyond what I thought possible. Stark couldn't imagine just how powerful Miss Amy was. Although he had very much witnessed her might at Aesop, it was an entirely different scenario to physically be in the presence of an orbital body she created. The spacecraft's approach was carefully calculated as they prepared for descent. As their spacecraft approached the vibrant, swirling atmosphere of Argon, Gustav and Stark were suddenly jolted by an unexpected resistance. A shimmering barrier, invisible until now, materialized just as their ship was about to enter the planet's orbit. Stark, startled by the sudden halt, looked over at Gustav with concern. What's happening? Why can't we move forward? Gustav's brow furrowed in confusion and surprise responded, This wasn't here before. Miss Amy must have later put this in place to prevent external entry. But she should be aware of my presence by now. Why isn't she taking the barrier down? Gustav wondered out loud. It was impossible for anything to pass Miss Amy by since she became a goddess, so Gustav expected her to have sensed their spacecraft long before it got to this point. Trying to understand the situation, Gustav instructed the ship's AI to attempt a gentle push forward, but the barrier remained impassive, its surface repelling every advance with increasing force. Let's not force it. We might damage the ship, or worse, trigger a countermeasure we're not prepared for. Uncle Bela watched in amazement as Gustav interacted with the newly revived NID. The artifact, long dormant and silent within the depths of the Vertigan vaults, now pulsed with a vibrant, mystical energy. Mr. Crimson, to use TH. Don't worry, I understand how it works. Gustav cut Uncle Bela off. He proceeded to place his palm flat against the NID, and the device responded immediately, its surface shimmering with an ethereal glow. The rhythmic pulsing seemed to sync with Gustav's own energy, creating a resonance that filled the room with a palpable sense of anticipation. Gustav's thoughts were singular. I need to find a way to get to the remnants of planet Humbad. He held onto this intention, willing the NID to provide a path forward. After a tense few moments, the artifact responded. A projection of shimmering letters floated in the air before them. Planet Argon. ***. Gustav stepped back, his surprise evident. Argon? That's the name Miss Amy calls her planet. The room fell silent as the NID powered down, its task seemingly complete. Uncle Bela, breaking the silence, confirmed what the machine had implied. It seems that whatever you need, Gustav, is tied to planet Argon. According to our ancestors, the NID has never been wrong. Gustav, puzzled, murmured to himself, but why there? What could possibly be on Miss Amy's planet that relates to Humbad or the Warp Demolator? Miss Amy's planet was still a very new one, so it didn't make any sense to him. Stark chimed in, Remember, Miss Amy isn't just your former master. She's a creator of worlds, a manipulator of cosmic scales. There is every possibility that she has foresight of the current predicament. The idea resonated with Gustav, but he was still skeptical about it. You might be right. I guess the only way to find out is by heading there. I'll arrange for transport, Stark voiced in response. Chapter 1509, Your Past. Chapter 1509, Your Past, Author's Note. Do not unlock second question. What is the future of Argon under its creator's vision? Gragoroth the Path, Keeper voiced once more. Gustav instantly recalled his moments of recollection within the spacecraft on their way here. This was something Miss Amy had personally told him. He was starting to believe more and more that she really didn't want anyone visiting besides himself. Miss Amy envisions Argon as a model of a world governed by principles of equality, the equality that other civilizations fail to adopt. Gustav answered with a tone of certainty. The creature's blazing eyes seemed to flicker, perhaps in approval, as it moved on to the third question. Third question. What is the one secret shared by master and disciple that our Creator warned Gustav never to reveal to anyone? Now Gustav was sure that he was right. He let out a little chuckle upon hearing this. Stark stared at him in bewilderment. You do know the answer, right? Of course. I'm just a little surprised, Gustav voiced in response before turning to face Graggoroth the Path Keeper once more. My ability to steal bloodlines and make them my own, Gustav answered. Stark eyes nearly popped out of their sockets upon hearing this. What? Graggoroth the Path Keeper slowly withdrew its sword from the ground, the platform fading away as it considered their responses. Your answers are accepted. You may pass, he stated. Stark was still in awe, but this pretty much proved that it was accurate. Questions ran through his mind, but at the moment they needed to head forward. As the barrier dissolved, Gustav and Stark exchanged a look of relief and curiosity. They proceeded through the opening, each step taking them deeper into the heart of Aughan and closer to the answers they sought. Gustav and Stark descended through the teal skies of Aughan, their path illuminated by ethereal clouds that shimmered with a heavenly glow. The air was crisp and invigorating, filled with the sense of unfamiliar flora. As they ventured deeper, the landscape revealed its unique beauty, rolling hills dotted with vibrant, alien flowers and towering structures that blended organic curves with crystalline sharpness, unlike anything on Earth. Stark, taking in the breathtaking views, commented, This place, it's like stepping into a painting. Every corner is a masterpiece. Miss Amy didn't just create a world. She crafted a living artwork. But it's changed since I was last here. More alive, Gustav intoned. As they neared the structure that Graggoroth the Pathkeeper had directed them toward, a magnificent temple emerged from the horizon, its spires piercing the clouds. Its architecture was a harmonious blend of ancient, earthly designs and otherworldly aesthetics, with walls made of a luminescent stone that seemed to pulse gently with internal light. The area around the temple buzzed with activity. Beings clad in flowing, white garments moved about their daily routines. These creatures had an ethereal quality, their movements graceful and fluid, exuding an aura of peace and purpose. Upon seeing Gustav and Stark, the creatures paused, their luminous eyes wide with curiosity. However, they maintained a respectful distance, whispering amongst themselves in a melodious language that filled the air with its lilting cadence. As Gustav and Stark approached the temple, the crowd parted naturally, creating a pathway for them. The air was filled with a resonant hum, possibly from the temple itself, which vibrated with a powerful energy. Stark, looking at the parting crowd, asked Gustav, "Do you think Miss Amy is inside? Will she know we're here?" "I can't be certain. I don't sense her presence, but she's also very much powerful than I am, so it's possible that she can escape my perception," Gustav analyzed with a disturbed look. One thing for sure was that things were different. Miss Amy would be aware of his own presence and revealed herself, so something didn't seem right. Just then, a figure approached them. This being was taller than the others, with skin that shimmered like moonlight and eyes that reflected the stars of the night sky. Its robes were adorned with symbols that glowed faintly, tracing the contours of ancient celestial maps. "Welcome to Aughan, travelers. I am Salethiel, guardian of the Amy Temple. We sensed your arrival through the Song of the Spires. What brings you to this sacred place?" Author's note: please check out my new story, Evo's Legacy. Rise of the Strongest System Bearer support me by adding it to your library and reading. Thank you all. Let's not force it. We might damage the ship or worse, trigger a countermeasure we're not prepared for, Gustav instructed with a bothersome expression. Can we find a way around it? Stark questioned. I'm not sure. There's a high chance it surrounds the entire planet. Gustav paused, considering their options. This is no ordinary barrier. as Gustav delved deeper into his examination. Stark monitored the energy readings, noting a peculiar pattern. Gustav, it looks like the closer we get to the barrier, the more our ship's systems are drained. Our energy levels are dropping. Gustav, pulling back from his focused state, nodded slowly. You're right. It's not just a physical barrier. It doesn't seem to allow any type of matter through. Knowing how powerful Miss Amy was, Gustav was very well aware that whatever he threw at the barrier wouldn't matter. She was able to keep even the third strongest elf out. What's our next move then? How do we get through? Stark inquired. I'll use God Eyes to scan the barrier and the planet, Gustav voiced in response. God Eyes has been activated. Activating his God Eyes, Gustav's vision expanded, piercing through the veil to analyze the barrier structure and the planet's surface. His eyes glowed with an intense light as streams of complex data flowed into his mind. As he scrutinized the terrain, a particular anomaly caught his attention, a subtle, unnatural opening on the far side of the planet. Stark, look there! He pointed towards the coordinates displayed on the ship's navigation screen. There's an opening on this side of the planet. An opening? That's peculiar. Stark was just as befuddled as him. Why would there be a barrier covering up almost the entirety of the planet, except for one spot? They adjusted their course, heading towards the indicated location. The journey was brief, and soon they hovered above the opening, which was indeed too small for their spacecraft to pass through. It's smaller than I expected. Looks like we're going on a little excursion then, Stark said to Gustav. Family head, it's not advisable for you to go without proper backup. One of his bodyguards voiced in defiance. I appreciate your concern, but Gustav is more than capable of handling any threats. We'll be fine. Despite the bodyguards' protests, Stark reassured them of their safety due to Gustav's formidable power. As Gustav and Stark approached the opening while flying, a brilliant beam of light suddenly materialized in front of them. The light morphed into a majestic creature adorned with a shimmering cape and conjoined silver horns that arched gracefully back from its head. The creature was imposing, standing about 9 feet tall with eyes that blazed like twin suns. It carried a 7-foot-long sword, which it stabbed into the ground on a newly formed platform beneath its feet. I am Gragroth, the Pathkeeper. Entry is unallowed without correctly answering 3 of my questions, the creature voiced with an imposing tone. Stark looked to Gustav, uncertain of their next move. Should we try to answer, or do you want to take a more direct approach? He asked. Gustav observed the creature carefully, noting the familiar essence that emanated from it, a signature that he recognized as Miss Amy's. This being is infused with Miss Amy's essence, and it possesses a power greater than my own. No doubt one of Miss Amy's creation. We should comply with its demands. Reluctantly, Stark nodded, turning back to the creature with a cautious stance. We will answer your questions. Proceed. First question. What binds the realms of Agon and Earth? Gragroth the Pathkeeper voiced. Gustav pondered for a moment before answering, Miss Amy herself being originally someone from Earth. Incorrect, Gragroth the Pathkeeper responded. You have one more try before you are forever denied entry into Agon. Stark's eyes narrowed in suspicion, since he also believed this would be the correct answer. Gustav was a bit taken aback, but his mind raced with different possibilities. It's not related to abilities. I'd say being at the edge of the Milky was, but that's not it either, since the sun is outside of it. So perhaps in this case, it's a case of personal bond. Gustav stared at Gragroth once more before spitting out another answer. Master-student relationship? Correct. Our creator is only bound by her affection for her only pupil, Gustav Crimson, Gragroth answered with a tone of reverence. Oh, we got it, Stark jubilated. 2 more questions, human, Gragroth reminded him. Gustav decided to play the disciple card. I am actually Gustav Crimson, so can you just let us through? You shall not pass until all 3 questions are accurately answered, Gragoroth stated with a strong tone. He is saying the truth, though, Stark chimed in from the side. You shall not pass until all 3 questions are accurately answered, Gragoroth repeated his earlier statement. I'm guessing this is a preventive measure against any form of deceit, which might mean Miss Amy doesn't want anyone visiting except for me, Gustav thought. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.